In 1995, I participated in an underwater and ham radio expedition to Easter Island. My task was to photograph the underwater environment. See, in addition, for an additional project, I brought my model airplane along, equipped with a camera. And you might note the high-tech method for attaching rubber bands. Anyway, despite the windy conditions, I did manage to fly at 2 different locations. Next, please. Our expedition camped out here at the Bay of La Perouse, or Hangaho'onu, as the locals call it. We camped out in tents. This particular tent was mine, which was a beautiful view right out to the bay. Next. Another picture from the airplane shows other parts of the camp. The large tent was our mess tent and meeting place. And again, this is where I stayed. And for perspective, there's a person walking by. Next slide. Oh, is the microphone working?
The PA system doesn't work at all.
Oh, okay. I'll try to project then. Okay. The second site was at Ahu Tongariki with its 15 large moai. We'll see this a little bit later on from KAP. Okay.
This is from the airplane?
This is from the airplane, that's correct. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Let's see, where am I at? Okay, no, I'm up here. Oh, okay, here we go. I was so excited for my aerials that I wanted to go back and continue, but the airplane wasn't really a good method for taking taking pictures because of the windy conditions and the rough ground. This is when I heard about Kite aerial photography, and Brooks's name came up, of course. So I contacted him, and he invited us down to look at his equipment. Brooks was so knowledgeable, and he was so enthusiastic. It was really a great feeling, and we went away thinking, wow, we can do this. Okay. And, I started reading the aerial eye and for some good ideas, and I started construction of my first rig. The second one I built is the one shown here. It's a Yashica T4 with the pan, tilt, and shutter capabilities. It's built with 3 30-seconds plywood and weighs in at about 1 pound, 3 ounces. I chose wood because it's sort of a natural progression from my model airplane experience. I think I'm missing something here, but next slide. The second rig is basically the same construction, except it's with 3/16 plywood and weighs in at 2 pounds, 7 ounces. We used an 18 to 35 millimeter zoom lens. Okay, next slide. The 13-foot Delta Conine is our basic workhorse, but we also use a Flowform 16 and 30. Next slide. This is our typical setup. It includes the DC, our fuzzy tail, Flowform, and the rigs. We also carried a counter and a wind gauge. We chose to use this kind of a wind-up method for winding up our picobay and storing it.
The counter is for counting string length? Or?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, to count our frames.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Next slide.
Okay. We have a very light rig because we take it all on the airplane with us, and we're limited. We usually go a little bit over. 3 suitcases a piece is the maximum we can take. So let's see. We've included some maps here of the world. Let's see. Easter Island is
right
down
there.
about there. We were surprised to learn that Easter Island is in fact east of California. And it's 2,000 miles off the coast of South America. It's the most remote inhabited place on Earth. Now, maybe not Antarctica is not continuously inhabited at the North Pole or South Pole. Let's see. Next slide. The island is 65 square miles. It's formed of 3 volcanoes. The oldest, Poiki, is 3 million years old. The next, Rano Kau, is 1 million years old. And the last one, Taravaka, filling in between the 2 other islands, erupted 300,000 years ago. Next slide. Hangaroa is the only village. It has about 3,000 inhabitants. This is the main downtown area. You can see the landing strip for the airport along there. We've made 3 trips to Easter Island. We stayed 3.5 or 4 weeks each time. We rent a bungalow and a Jeep, and we cook our own food, buying what's available from the local fishermen and the local market.
Okay. Another point of interest, the airport runs clear across the island, and it was built by the U.S. as a emergency landing site for the shuttle.
Next slide. Don was eager to show me the site where he had stayed before. We wanted to document this area because we had heard in the meantime, in the year that passed, they said, they're going to build a container port here. They're going to dredge this out and build, pave a lot of area and build an international container port here. So we wanted to document the area in case they were successful in doing it, and also to help try and stop it. We made our pictures available to some people in Chile who were lobbying against the container port because it would have destroyed important archaeological sites. They're all around here. Before we went on our first trip, we contacted Georgia Lee, a well-known Easter Island archaeologist, and we asked for her advice. We offered to photograph sites that were of particular interest to her, and she also gave us introductions to 2 archaeologists who'd be working on the island when we would be there. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, okay, I got it. This is Ahuhekihi, where the 2 archaeologists will be working, and this is the same site with a little, you can see the little dock here, and a new house, actually. So, next slide. And here there are 2 archaeological digs. Oh, Don wanted me to point out right away, this is a beginner's mistake. We had the stick sticking out too far. Fortunately, Don had brought E6 processing chemicals to the island, and we developed a few rolls, just 3 rolls or something while we were there, and so we caught this mistake right away, and you'll only see it on a couple of rolls. There's 2 digs here taking place here. This is Chris Stevenson of Earthwatch doing a 1 meter by 2 meter excavation. And over here is Elaine Martinson Whalen of the Kon-Tiki Museum in Norway, and she's also doing a 1 meter by 2 meter excavation right here. Oh yeah, we have the arrow here, which is pointing magnetic north, and it is 6 meters long. Each of those colors alternating is 1 meter, just to give you an idea of scale. Next slide.
We had a request to photograph this petroglyph site. We often photograph our sites from 3 different levels, starting at a high level to cover the whole site and put it in perspective or in context. Next slide. Down, and this is down a little bit closer, and you can start to pick out some features now. And again, we see the 6 meter arrow. Next slide. See, at about 40 feet, you can start to see details. Details are more apparent. The panel itself is about 30 meters across. The two features that Elaine are pointing out are these two crescents or shapes are a representation of a double-hull canoe, probably which the Polynesians came over on. Next slide, please. At an adjacent site at about the same height, you can see two petroglyphs that are quite apparent. The top one is probably a tuna fish, which is very popular on Easter Island.
What size would that be?
Big.
About 2 meters across.
That's the kind of aerial photograph?
That's correct.
Yes.
You know,
It's very hard to photograph this kind of features from the ground because they're big and you get a lot of distortion. So this really helps. The archaeologists just love this.
This may be an islander's interpretation of a barracuda or a shark, or who knows what it might have been. It might have been his last night's nightmare.
Okay, next slide. And sometimes conditions are just perfect, and then Don really loves his work. Next slide. Okay. We really, when we're driving out to the site and stuff, we'll be discussing, how can we best represent, photograph an area. This slide with the oblique angle really emphasizes the vertical parts of the site. This wall is one of the best walls on the island, and it's the one that led Thor Heyerdahl to think that the Easter Islanders couldn't have done it. It must have been South Americans. There are moai here. All the moai on the island have been toppled over, probably mostly during warfare. Different tribes wanted to reduce the power of the other tribes by toppling over their statues. Maybe earthquakes played a part in it too. There are legends of earthquakes. Okay, next slide. This is a vertical view of the same site, and it's very different. The previous site was recognizable by anybody who had seen it. This site was a completely different view than anyone had seen. And it shows the top of the retaining wall and the platform rocks that the moai stood on, and the toppled moai. When the warring clans knocked over the next door neighbor's moai, they were knocked over in such a way that when they fell over, they would fall on a rock placed the right place so their necks would break. About 90% of the moai were toppled over face forward.
Are those heads at the top there?
These are top knots. They put those on top of the statues, and it's not really known how they did that. They didn't have cranes. Different kind of rock, different quarry. Yeah, each of these things, these rocks were brought 6 or 8 miles. The moai were moved 6 or 8 miles to this site, and the top knots several miles. And that's one of the, how were the moai moved?
It's the question.
That's the question. You start asking your kids that right when they're real young. Okay, next slide.
Okay. Ranu Kau is the largest crater on Easter Island. It's about 1 mile across. Here we used a 15 millimeter lens to capture the whole width. Located on the far side of the rim, right in this area, is an area called Orongo. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Here at Orongo, it's often difficult to fly the kite because of the turbulent winds. On one day, while we were sightseeing, we noticed the winds were just about perfect. So we quickly launched our flow foam 30 with the T4 rig and managed to shoot 3 rolls of film. Okay.
I was yelling at him, back up, back up.
Yeah, she knows my insurance policy's paid up.
Okay, next slide. Am I supposed to?
No, this is mine. Okay, yes. Mata Naral is a sacred site with extraordinary petroglyphs. Over the years, part of it has fallen into the ocean due to erosion. Next slide.
Now, this is the crater right there, and on this side is the ocean. Next slide. Next, yeah.
Yep, there you go.
There we go. See?
Yes. Yeah. Run, yes. What am I doing here? Let's see. The World Monuments Fund has used these pictures in their attempt to raise money to help stabilize the site. Next.
Okay. Next slide.
Okay. Located near the petroglyphs is a series of stone houses perched on the crater rim there. And these houses were used for a sacred annual ritual of the Birdman.
The entrances to the houses, you have to crawl through them. And you can't even stand in them. Couldn't. I never went in.
Yeah, next slide.
How old are those houses?
500 years,
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, it's actually a newer feature on the island.
Because you were talking about earthquakes, that's what I was just wondering, because they were still standing.
Well, a lot of this is actually reconstructed. Some of them had caved in quite a bit. They're done with a cantilevered rock roof and then covered with dirt and grass. Okay, it's unusual to be able to fly the kite out over the cliff like this because usually the wind is coming up and very turbulent, and the wind also comes up from the crater, and so and it just blows like stink up here.
Next slide.
Working in public places, we are often tourist attractions ourselves. After the first year, we brought a notebook with pictures that we had taken because we wanted to be able to show the local people the aerials of their land. Now these people want to know, what the hell are we doing up here? Okay, next slide. Now, when you drive along the road here, all that you can see is this stone fence, and this site is very little known. This is a Ahu site, and there's a stone house foundation. Next slide. It's very windy on Easter Island all the time, so the islanders dug gardens and built walls around them to protect them from the wind. And that there's a lot, they'd made very small wind-protected gardens. Next slide. And here you can see a moai platform with fallen moai, broken fallen moai, the heads. This appears to be just a big pile of rubble, but and it would be very difficult to climb on. So these aerial photos show a great deal of detail that you just can't otherwise see. And I think this would be a great candidate. I love to take this with a stereo camera because there's quite a bit of elevation, which the aerial picture flattens. Okay, next slide.
At this site, we started at a high altitude with our lens set to 20 millimeters to capture an overall view of the site. Next slide. Mm-hmm. Oh, what's that?
I was going to do a reference to this, but that's okay.
Okay, where are we at? It's down here. Moving in a little closer, you can see at least 5 moai, 2 of which are lying face up. Remember, I mentioned most of the moai were toppled face down, so this is one is unusual. It's kind of my favorite ahu because they are laying up and you can look at them and they're looking back at you.
Next slide.
Again, another view.
What's the rusty line?
Okay, well, go to the next slide. Okay, sometimes the platforms were decorated with a red scoria, the same material that the top knots were made out of.
And this is the upper edge of the retaining wall, and those stones are made to fit over so they're cut away to fit over the top of the retaining wall.
Almost a tongue and groove.
Yeah. Okay.
Shadow in the left hand of that? Red band?
We often get the.
This here?
Yeah.
I think that's a feature of the stone there. I think the kite might have been, it was probably the DC, the 13-foot DC, so I think it'd be a pretty big shadow.
Okay, next slide. To quote Simon, what the hell are you doing up there? The Easter Islanders would often drive by and they'd wave to us, thumbs up, you know, or this whole group of people got out from a couple of cars and they looked at our picture book and we took their picture and eventually we even sent them a copy on email. Next slide. That was at this site, which is one of the oldest sites on the island, and it's reputed to be the place where Hotumatua, the leader of the first Polynesians, is buried there. Well, nobody says exactly where. There are 3 platforms. Actually, probably we need the next slide. Yeah. There are 3 platforms here. The older ones are smaller in the background, and this is a bigger, newer one. And here we notice that the erosion is getting kind of serious. These top knots are right on the top of the cliff. How does this work? How does it work? Oh, this. Yeah. So this area here is all eroded away. We don't know how much that's eroded or how fast. Anyway, we saw this and we decided we should photograph that from another angle. Next slide, please. And that's here. And here's the Ahu right there. And this is even a little bit of a cave under there that's caused. And when we get the El Nino weather conditions, they get really bad weather down there too. Next slide. This is another kind of erosion. In this case, this moai is just weathering away. Protection is a big problem to preserve these, you know, for another 1,000 years. The next slide. On this Ahu was erected the second highest moai ever built, ever carved and transported. And here again, the erosion is coming right up behind the Ahu. We couldn't even walk along here in this area because it's so close to the Ahu. So I really wanted to photograph this site, and it was very difficult because the wind is always blowing this way. And I couldn't get Don to wait out here to launch the kite, you know.
No way. No way.
This is the old road. They've built a new road now in, but that was just a year or 2 ago. And this fence was built by the sheep herders in the early 20th century. Next slide. That's you.
Okay. This is the largest moai ever moved or erected. When erected, the top nut was placed on top, and you know, any theories how they got it up there? People are still thinking about that.
Okay.
Kite, there you go.
Well, don't laugh. There's a guy now that is saying that the obelisks in Egypt were probably erected by Kite.
Ah.
It's a girl. It's a girl.
Cosmic kites.
You know, developing that theory.
Okay. The next slide. This is a petroglyph representation of a spirit on the island that's called Aku Aku, and the Easter Islanders believe in them. They're mischievous mostly, but they're sometimes troublesome. The women don't like to go out at night because of them. We started to believe in them too when the winds just refused to cooperate with us at some sites day after day, as in the next site. We had a request from Kathy Orliak in Paris to photograph this site. She's been doing a lot of work here. There's a lot of house foundations along here. It was a very big site and a lot of gardens. These stone circles are the wind-protected gardens. But the wind blows down off the volcano, or else it's just thermals. And we went here many times, tried to launch our kite and just couldn't do it, you know. One of the main attractions at Easter Island, and a challenge for a photographer, is the Ranuraraku Quarry. After the moai were quarried, they were slid down the hill, and in many cases they went into a hole where they stood up straight. The holes have filled in around them, and they stand all around here in various states of completion. Next slide. Again, this from vertical, and this is a house foundation with a front terrace. And these are trails. It's quite steep. And these are trails. Okay, next slide. Now here, this is the quarry, or part of the quarry. It goes on for quite a ways. Here it comes down where in there you can see a tiny bit of the crater. What?
We don't see the light of your marker.
Oh. Oh, okay. Well, the batteries go up and down then.
Is this basalt then?
It's called volcanic tuff. They're carved out of volcanic tuff. Here you can see a little bit of the crater and the ocean on the other side. And a group of tourists climbing the trail here. But everywhere there's moai being carved. Must have been quite a beehive of activity at one time.
So it all stopped at a particular time?
It all stopped at a particular time. The legend says that they killed their leaders. The problem with that is then you don't have any leaders, you have chaos. So this was at the height of their culture, that they killed their leaders. At that point, they were probably also at the height of their population and exploiting the resources to the maximum. By then, they had destroyed all their trees. They couldn't build fishing boats to go out fishing, so they were limited to inshore fishes. They had by then killed all their seabirds. We saw almost no seabirds on the island. They have still not come back.
So that's like a factory that has stopped production?
Stopped production one day. Everything is just left. The tools are still lying there in the quarry. They just rebelled, or at least that's what we surmise. You know. Next slide. There's been an ongoing survey done by the University of Chile where they've done the whole quarry. They've documented and drawn the quarry, and we found it interesting to compare this with our pictures. Here's 4 moai that are stepped on top of each other. This is the largest moai that was ever attempted. There's some little vertical moai here. Next slide. And here's the same view. These are the stepped moai. Some places where moai have been removed already and more are being carved below. There's the little vertical one. And El Gigante, the largest ones that was built. And this is stair steps cut into the rock coming up to this place. Next slide. Gives you a little different perspective of where those stepped moai are. The El Gigante is right over here, yeah, right there, and the cliff. Okay. Oh, and there's right over here. You can't see it well, but that's where the one is. There's one kneeling moai on the island, and that's where he is. Okay, the next slide. Now, is that you?
Okay. We were asked to take a series of infrared pictures as part of a lead-in to a proposal for a more serious article or survey using infrared. That doesn't come out right. Anyway, in order to complete the task, I built a 2-camera rig using a Yashica for the normal color and Minolta 7000 for the infrared film.
Next slide.
Okay, just a second.
Oh, do you want?
Yeah, okay. Both cameras were triggered simultaneously. Each had their own servo. Okay. We did manage to deploy the rig between squalls. It was a kind of a bad day that day, but we were running out of time, and so we had to squeeze it in. It was very windy, but we managed.
This was on our first trip there. Yeah. Okay, next slide.
And it was so windy that we actually tied the kite line to a large rock.
Okay.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Looking towards the quarry in regular film or natural color. Next slide. And again in infrared.
Had you gone through this trial and error period that Jim talked to, or just sort of go out and take your chances?
We did a trial and error on the ground. The person that asked me to request the infrared film asked me about 2 weeks before we were going to leave. So I was just trying to get the rig done. I did finish the rig, and it worked fine on the bench, but we never took it up. But we did practice with a roll or two at ground level, trying red filter and a yellow filter, and we went with the yellow filter.
Yeah, and we bracketed all the pictures to see what the shutter would be.
So again, this was kind of a guess method for the exposure. The exposure was manual, while the Yashica was automatic.
Right.
Next slide. Okay, from the same point, we turned the camera away from the quarry to an area where the moai were transported out of the quarry. You know, this is a modern road or modern path, but the quarry is denoted by several moai that are just laying on the ground where they just quit moving them and said, I quit, you know, I'm out of here, leave the moai. There's a whole road that goes out this way with moai face down.
Okay, next slide.
Again, the same picture in infrared. And once again, you know, these long fences were built by the sheep herders, but what they did was they took the stones from the archaeological sites to build these fences. What a shame.
And I think in this case, the white, we were extremely disappointed with the guys who did the developing. We sent it to some lab in Colorado, and they must have dropped it, you know.
Or
and
bubbles or
splattered
something.
all over it. It was.
But you see, this was before, this was the old colored infrared. This was the E4 process. And you didn't have very many choices where you can get it processed. But I guess now it's E6.
Well, we need to, okay, next slide. So, continuing with Moai Road stuff, let's see now. There are still some trails. You can sort of see one along here, and they have the Moai lying along them. In 2000 and 2001, Professor Charlie Love from Wyoming did an excavation along the Moai Road. You can see it here. And we heard about it and we were very interested, and we contacted him to give us maps to the site. As you know, the aerial photography levels the land out. You know, we came along here, we had to find this site, even with the maps. So we scouted around, we hiked all around back and forth till we found his sites. And the amazing thing is that nobody ever excavated it before. Next slide. This is a little closer view of the excavations along the old Moai Trail. Things like this are visible on the island. They go all around the island. His findings suggest that Easter Islanders actually built roads to move the Moai. They'd always assumed that they just dragged them across the ground. That's a clue to the ongoing question of how were the Moai moved. Next slide. And to everyone's surprise, he found that there were curbstones along the edges of the Moai Road and paving. And the paving kind of sloped inward. They didn't have wheels on Easter Island. The paving kind of sloped inward, and he did cross-section excavations along this site and a number of others. You can see the Moai here lying along the road. And then he had to fill them back in. These areas here are where the dirt was piled, and then it's been filled back in. Okay, next slide.
But he had no idea how they, like, did they roll them on logs or just simply drag them by brute force? Or?
Well, they think that they probably put them on some kind of a wooden sled and either rolled them on logs or, however, the archaeologists have been trying to simulate moving the Moai, and they haven't been extremely successful. One thing, however, is that the mud on volcanic soil gets very slippery when wet, and that may have had something to do.
Did it get cold enough to freeze there?
No. It's about the same temperature climate as San Diego, for instance, where it's not tropical, but it never freezes or even frosts. Okay.
How old are the Moai?
They think that the Easter Islanders moved there about 600 AD and continued building Moai platforms until about 1600, and that's about the date of their collapse of their society due to overpopulation and overexploitation of the land. The first Western contact wasn't until 1644. And then it was sporadic, not even every generation there would be Western contact.
They lost the island for 10 years after the first Dutch convoy actually found it and mapped it, and then they went back to look for it, and they didn't really find it for the next first 10 years.
Roggeveen, a Dutch, was the first sailor to come there, explorer.
But after that first European contact, it was only 40 years, there was no first or second person historical account of exactly how they did things, I guess.
This is true. They did have writing on Easter Island, but there was a slave raid on the island in 1860, and I guess they invited all the important people on the island to a party on the ship, and then they shanghaied them, took them back to work in Peru as slaves. Very few of them survived, and all of the people who knew how to read the writing were killed, were taken in that slave raid, so that although there was writing, there was no one who knew how to read it. And then the Tahitians found, when they heard of this slave raid, they raised funds and went to Peru to try and return the surviving Easter Islanders, and there were not many. There were maybe 40, a handful of survivors. They put them on ships to take them back to Easter Island. Smallpox broke out on the ship, and so when they landed on Easter Island, there was a smallpox epidemic, after which time there were only about 140 surviving Easter Islanders. So that the population now of a little over 3,000 on the island has the gene pool of 141 people. It's tough to marry on that island without marrying a cousin.
Peak population thought to be?
There's guesses between 7 and 20,000. That's a pretty wide range. But on a 65 square mile island with no access to outside resources, and the thing is, if the population doubles, you probably all know this, if the population doubles, at some point the curve starts to go straight up. And if it was 7,000, and then a generation later it was 14,000, probably the next generation they were down considerably due to starvation and warfare. Okay. This is Anakena. It's one of 2 sandy beaches on the island. And it's thought to be where the first islanders landed. And it's a very sacred spot. This is Ahu Now, and there are 7 moai there. This is the one that Tor Heyerdahl erected during his expedition, one of his expeditions there. Next slide. There's a closer view. They've just been putting protective fences around the sites to try and keep livestock and people out. In the summer, I understand this beach is just full of people and umbrellas, but we go there in the late spring. Next slide. Another view, obviously. This is a little crater, or little, what do you call it, a little mound from a cone, yeah, cone. Okay, the next slide.
And moving up the coast a little eastward, you come to an area called Ovahe.
That's Anakena there.
Ovahe is the other sandy beach area, and it's also a good place for snorkeling and skinny dipping.
And the water's pretty nice. The water's not as warm as Hawaii, but it's really nice.
See, again, anywhere you look on the island, there are sites, Ahu platforms. For instance, right in here is a platform. We were just walking around and we saw it and we decided to put the kite up and we took a few pictures of that area.
Yeah, and gardens, they're just all over, everywhere. They must have been, at one time, this now unpopulated island must have just been crawling with life. You know, people with you find house foundations everywhere you go.
Okay, next slide. Okay. Let's see. In conclusion, we would like you to turn away from archaeology and give you a view of the town of Hangaroa. You're looking right down the main street from the Caleta right into the center of town.
That's the church right up there at the top of the street.
Sunday church is also a social event. If you're ever on Easter Island, go to church and actually go into the services. They sing their hymns in the Easter Island language. It's a very pretty language. And after service, everybody gathers around outside and converses and visits. This area is where the fishermen tie up their boats, the Caleta.
Kayeta.
Mm-hmm.
Gymnasium.
Oh yes, and there's the gymnasium and the soccer field.
Looks like burning on the left-hand part of the photograph.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, the Easter Islands are always burning their grass, which also is another problem because it burns over archaeological sites. Yeah, they burn the grass to get a new crop for their cattle, their livestock, which there are too many for the island.
And they roam around free.
And for you party animals, there's the local disco. Starts at about 12 o'clock at night.
Runs till 4 or something like that. There's another one on the other over here that starts about 10 for dinner and then goes until this one opens and everybody goes over there. The musicians mostly play at the tourist bars and restaurants, and then when they're done with the tourists, they come over and play at the discos.
What's the size of the population there?
There's 3,000 to 4,000 people on the island.
Is there a town there?
This is the town.
That's it.
That's it.
Next slide. And a nice view of the cemetery.
The Catholic Church tries to get people to bury their dead in the cemetery. The traditional way was for people to go out and be buried, either go and die in caves or be buried by their family in caves. but the Catholic Church now has them using the cemetery.
You want to say something about the younger people?
Oh, this part over here is children, and these are adults. And there's another cemetery outside of town where the leper colony was, and there are a great number of people buried out there. They've just cleaned it up and consecrated it. People were afraid to even go there to mark the graves of their loved ones. And every family has people in that leper colony burial ground.
Next
Okay,
slide.
next slide.
Another view of Hangaroa with the volcano Ranukau in the background. Next slide.
Next slide. This was the most difficult shot we took the whole time we were there.
Talk about line. We needed miles and miles.
Okay, that's it.
Just wanted to mention that here are 3 of the 5 rigs that we have used, either practicing or going to Easter Island. And thanks to Glenn, we have 2 moai on each side casting their spiritual powers over our cameras to protect them from damage. Any questions?
Yeah. We have a notebook here which is the one we show the Easter Islanders when we go there. Doesn't have any of the last trip in it yet, but and we have a few handouts left over from a conference that we did for archaeologists, and it's not enough to go around, but we'll be glad to share them.